All right, everyone. So today I wanted to go over 5 really big mistakes that could be causing you to lose a lot in the arena. So let's start off with number 1. This is a really important concept to know specifically for the arena, and that is speed and the order in which your champions are going to act. Now, this is not as important in PvE because the battles are going to be a lot more drawn out. You know, like the clan boss, for example, is 20 to 25 turns, and unless you're specifically using a speed-tuned team, you know, things just kind of all blend together. You're probably going to be playing on auto. It's not as important. But for the arena, battles are going to be a lot more quick-paced, and things are going to happen really quickly. It's very important to know the order that your champions are going to act. You know, for example, I'm always going to have my Arbiter act first, then I'm going to have my Masteries act second, my Warlord act third, and my Sir Nicholas act fourth. Now, this is really important for many different reasons, but another really big one is your team synergy. Because the arena is such a quick-paced battle, you really want to make sure that you have a good understanding of what your team is doing for the other members in your team, and if they're applying things like buffs and debuffs, the order is very important to make sure that the champions that actually do damage are obviously going to act at the end after all those buffs and debuffs are applied and not at the start. So if you don't really have a full understanding of this, you want to make sure to re-gear your speed on your champions in a consistent way, so you know what champion's always going to be first, second, third, and fourth, and have their skills set up in a way that's going to have your team synergize really well. So I want to go ahead and just show you guys as an example here why this is so unbelievably important. And anything that really messes up this order, whether it's a mistake of my own, like I accidentally switch a piece of gear that messes up this order, or if it's an enemy skill that messes up my order, it completely messes up my win condition, and it's probably going to cause me to lose a match in the arena. So when I start off here, I am always going to have my Arbiter go first. Then she's going to place her increased attack and also her turn meter fill, which is really important because that's going to make sure that my next champions are going to act second, third, and fourth, and hopefully my enemies are not going to interrupt one of my really crucial turns, because those turns when I'm applying things like buffs and debuffs, if I have an enemy that interrupts, that could end up being a disaster. So Arbiter is going to go first. Then Madame Cerise is going to apply her debuffs and also her buff removal. Really important because now the enemies are going to not only take more damage, but if they do somehow manage to interrupt me and attack, they're also going to inflict a lot less damage as well. And then I have my Warlord, which is actually the first champion that's going to start to do damage. Really important. Notice how my first 2 champions didn't actually do any damage, and that's on purpose. Very important. You don't want your champions going first that do damage because you haven't actually applied any of your buffs and debuffs. So now that I actually have buffs and debuffs applied, I can start to do damage, and it's going to be multiplied by quite a bit. Of course, Warlord is kind of not only damage on this ability, but it's also going to be some debuff utility by decreasing turn meter and putting enemy skills on cooldown. And of course, my last champion, who's also my slowest champion, is going to be the one to do the most damage here. That's his main goal, is now that I've done all of my buffs, debuffs, utility, I can come in here at the ends of the rotation, and now that my win condition is set up properly, this ability is going to do a whole lot of damage. And at this point, if there are any stragglers, which is totally fine, if there are, they're going to have all those buffs, debuffs applied, you know, their skills put on cooldown, so they're really not going to be a big threat. But having your order proper to set up your win condition properly is very, very important. And if you have your gear set up incorrectly, to where champions are not acting in the order that they are supposed to, even though technically your team might be just as strong. Like, if I have basically the same gear on all 4 of my champions, but my Sir Nicholas goes first, this team is so much worse. It is just a losing team at that point. The order is super, super important for the arena. So that is mistake number 1. Now let's move on to mistake number 2, and that is facing teams where you know there is a champion that is going to heavily counter your team, or specifically and you really have to think about this. This is a bit more of an advanced concept here, but your team's win condition. What is actually going to be the way that your team wins? And are there certain champions that are going to interrupt that method that you use in order to win battles yourself? So a really common example here that you'll see in a lot of top arena teams is this legendary here who always acts first and has a skill that actually places your skills on cooldown. And this is a disaster for so many different teams, including my own. So I will always try to avoid that champion if I see him, because, you know, if he goes first, which he always does, and then puts skills on cooldowns, I lose access to my buffs, my debuffs, my buff removal, and, you know, now my team and my champions are very weak, and the actual damage that I get from my Sir Nicholas is going to be really, really weak. So, you know, that's just an example champion for your team. Obviously, everyone's arena team is going to be a bit different, but you really have to go through and think to yourself, not only what champions do I have, but what is the way that I actually win arena battles, and what champions do I not want to face on the enemy team that are a threat to my win condition. So think about it that way, and that'll definitely help cut back your losses quite a bit. Now we're going to move on to mistake number 3 here, and that is attacking a team where you feel like you have a strong feeling like they are going to go first and not you. Now, obviously, speed is an important stat for many different reasons. It's really important for that first mistake that I talked about, to make sure that you can set up your speed to have your champions go in order. But also, of course, you want to make sure that you are going to be going first and not your opponent. And if you feel like you're kind of in the middle of this, like you're 50-50, you're going first, but there's also a good amount of teams that your opponent is going first, there's a couple things you can do besides just work on your own gear. And one of those is really make sure to try to focus on any arena teams that you see that do not have a speed champion as their lead. It'll be the first champion here, and if you see teams that don't have a speed lead for a champion, then they are going to have a lot less speed. And in a lot of cases, that also is a general signal that the enemy teams that you're facing are probably not really set up to be teams that are meant to act first. So you have to think about that a little bit as well. But really take a look at that first champion as well, and see, you know, what that champion is, and see if it's a team where your opponent, kind of their goal is to try to act first, or whether their goal is to try to do something else as a defense instead of trying to act first. Now, mistake number 4 has to do with team power, and I want to talk about this for a second because it's very important for me to lay this out properly. This is a really big mistake, is misunderstanding team power, and overvaluing team power is a really, really big mistake, but also not valuing it all and completely casting it aside is also a really big mistake. This is one of those things where you're kind of going to learn much better as you play the game more, is kind of what team power means. Now, generally, it means the stats that your team has through their gear and whatnot, but that doesn't necessarily mean how likely you are to win. There are a lot of stats that are going to inflate this team power number a lot that might not necessarily help them win a lot. You know, I know things like resistance have a very high weighting on the team power, so overvaluing it is a mistake. You don't want to think to yourself, okay, well, just because I have 176,000 team power, I'm always going to beat a team with 115,000 team power. That's absolutely not true. There are plenty of teams with lower team power that can absolutely crush me. And then on the other side of the scale, there are plenty of teams that have way more team power than me that I can absolutely crush. But it is still a generalization. You can get at a glance the rough stats that you have, the rough stats that your team has. And, you know, if I have, say, 200,000 team power and my enemy has 60,000 team power, you know, that's such a massive difference that, you know, generally speaking at that point, okay, I could probably lock up this win here without getting into too much more detail. and the other way around as well. You know, if you have 60,000 team power and your enemy team has 200,000, okay, well, it's very, very unlikely, not impossible, but very unlikely that I'm going to be able to beat that team. So I probably don't want to waste too much time and effort really getting into a lot more of the details. So getting that right balance of fully understanding team power is quite important. And the last thing that I want to end off here on is if you're still struggling and feel like you are losing a lot, it's really important to note that there are a lot of masteries that can actually benefit you very specifically for PvP. So using PvE champions in PvP, you know, it's fine if it's working for you. And you don't have to do a lot of switching and customization specifically. But if you still feel like you're kind of in that middle road where you're losing a decent amount of matches, take a look at that champion specifically, especially their masteries, and see if there's some stuff that you can switch around very specifically for PvP. Remember, PvP is quick-based, whereas a lot of other PvE content is a lot more drawn out. So, you know, certain masteries like Ruthless Ambush are super good for PvP, but not really that great for PvE, because it's increased damage by 8% for the first hit. Well, that is huge when the first hit really matters, and you're probably only going to be taking a couple of turns at the most. But in a PvE match, when you're taking 20 to 25 turns, you know, that 8% extra damage just on that first turn that you take, not really that big of a deal. So you're not going to be taking this for things like dungeons, but very big mastery for PvP. And there's some other really big ones too, like Evil Eye in the support tree for some turn meter, utility, and supports. Obviously, Killstreak here has a boost for Arena. There's a lot of other ones as well, you know, relying on things like having dead allies as well. This is something generally for more drawn out PvE content like dungeons. Probably don't want to constantly have our champions be dying because we're farming, but in PvP, it's going to happen. So, you know, these masteries become a bit more appealing. There's one here specifically for speed, so just take a look, and that can actually be the difference. Switching out some of those PvE masteries for PvP masteries, that can be the difference, cutting back a lot of those losses and securing those victories. So anyway, I'm going to end it off here. I threw a lot of info in this video, and I really hope that you guys enjoy. PvP is obviously a pretty complex topic in Raid Shadow Legends, so lots of other videos that could get into this in more detail, probably even more with the new 3v3 Tag Team Arena feature coming out as well. So if you guys enjoyed this video and you want more videos like this in the future, consider subscribing to the channel. Really do appreciate all the support, everyone. If you want to leave a like as well, it means more than you can imagine, so thank you very much to all of you guys who do that. And more Raid Shadow Legends videos, guys, tutorials should be popping up. Feel free to check them out. If not, until next time, this is Salt of the Salty Guild, signing out.